here is just show you how to set up a really simple system for making nice smooth camera arcs, which are really important. We want nice smooth camera arcs, they look good. So I'm going to make a really basic object. I'm just going to make a cube, and this is going to be my subject that I'm going to film with a camera. Okay, so I want a nice smooth camera arc where my camera starts perhaps on this side of my object and then just slowly and smoothly just arcs around it. And this is a really kind of, it's a common type of camera move that you use for models, for 3D logos, for all sorts of stuff. And it's really easy to do it badly. This is a really simple way to do it well. So first of all, I'm going to create a camera in the position where I want my camera to start. So I'm going to position my perspective view here, looking at my cube from a bit of a 3/4 sort of angle, a little bit low. And when I create a camera in Cinema 4D, it's created in the perspective view where I'm currently looking. So this is where I'm going to start with my camera move. So I'm going to go create, cameras, and just make a plain camera. So here I've got in my object list, there's my subject, which is my cube. Here's my camera that I've made. And if you remember from last week, the camera has a little, it's like a little sort of target alongside it. It's black, which means it's just existing in the scene. And if I spin my view around, there I can see my camera. If I click on that little target, it'll turn white. I'm now in the camera, and if I move this view, I'm driving my camera around and shifting it. So that's just setting up a basic camera. Okay, now I want a nice arc of my camera moving around this subject. It's already aiming at the subject, which is great. So I want it to rotate around this subject. So the easiest way to rotate an object around another object in Cinema 4D is to parent them together. So in Cinema 4D, I can create what's called a null object. A null is just an empty object. It doesn't do anything on its own. It's used for grouping objects. It's used for all sorts of stuff. It doesn't render. It's like a helper object. So I'm going to create a null, and the null that I've created, it's at the origin of my 3D world. Any objects that we make, any primitive objects, are created in Cinema 4D at the origin. So I've got my null. The cube that I created, which is my subject, is also at the origin. Now I want my camera to rotate around this cube. If my null is in the same place as the cube, what I can do is I can parent the camera onto the null, so just drag and drop it. And now if I select the null and grab my rotate tool, and remember R is the shortcut, if I click and drag on this green rotate axis, which is the y-axis, my camera is rotating pretty much around that subject. So all I'm doing is I'm using a null object at the center of my subject as a device to rotate my camera around. And what I do when I do that is I get a nice smooth arc. Now my camera, I can see just from looking at the top, my camera isn't aiming directly at my subject. I can see the center point of my camera is off to one side. So if I want to, I can look through my camera and maybe just center the object up a little bit. And again, if I grab the null object and rotate it around this green y-axis, I'm getting a nice smooth arc. So the way I'd actually keyframe that, the null object is the thing that's rotating around. That's the thing that I want to keyframe. So what I'd do is I'd go to the start of my timeline where I want my camera to be at the beginning, and I've got my null selected. This is really important that you get the right object selected. The null is the thing that's controlling it. That's the thing we want to keyframe. I'm going to select that and hit the little keyframe button, which is a key with a red circle around it. So this records position, rotation, and scale values for any object that's selected. So I've set a keyframe. I want my animation to take maybe 3 seconds, and we use 25 frames a second, so 3 seconds is 75 frames. I'm going to go to 75 frames, make sure my null is selected. I'm going to rotate it around a bit, which is going to make my camera arc, and then hit the keyframe button again. So I've set a start and an end keyframe, And if I scrub through my timeline, I should see my camera moving. That looks good. And if I look through my camera and hit play, I've got a really nice smooth camera arc. So that's just a really basic technique for setting up smooth camera arcs, is that you put a null object on the subject, parent the camera to that null, and then keyframe the null rotating, and you'll get perfect smooth arcs. A good idea as well is just to name anything that you create, especially nulls. In Cinema 4D you often make a lot of null objects, so I'm just going to double click that and call it cam rot for cam rotate. Okay, so that's just a super simple way to make nice smooth camera arcs. There are obviously lots of other ways of doing it, but I really like this technique because you get a nice natural circular arc. Obviously, if you shift the position of that null object, you'll get quite different types of arcs. You might get your camera arc past an object, so you can certainly experiment with the position of that null object. But that's a really simple way of making nice smooth rotations.